Hello, and welcome to the Humanistic Counselor, a podcast in which we discuss, analyze, critique, and celebrate both well-established and cutting-edge ideas across the field of humanistic counseling. I'm Brett Wilkinson, Editor-in-Chief of the Journal of Humanistic Counseling, otherwise known as JHC. I'd like to welcome Dr. Elizabeth Brisola, Dr. Floris van Vugt, and Alexandre Leblanc. Today we'll be discussing their 2025 JHC research article entitled The Lived Experience of No Longer Being Able to Play a Musical Instrument Due to Physical Impairments, a Heuristic Study. Dr. Elizabeth Brisola is a psychologist, professor, and licensed marriage and family counselor who is currently doing postdoctoral research at Yale University's Program for Recovery and Community Health. Born and raised in Brazil, her work spans diverse interests and populations, from Brazilian black women and immigrants to individuals struggling with serious mental illness and the effects of maternal singing. In all of these, her passion lies in uncovering the meanings these experiences have for each person using a person-centered phenomenological approach. Dr. Floris van Vugt is Associate Professor in Psychology at the University of Montreal. He was born several meters below sea level in the Netherlands and has studied mathematics and neuroscience in exotic places such as Paris, Pisa, Los Angeles, Hanover, and Lyon. He directs the Human Connection Science Lab, devoted to the scientific study of how humans understand other humans. The research focuses especially on how we can connect across different worldviews and in times of polarization. In his free time, he is an Italian espresso snob, sailing aficionado, and longboard commuter. Alexandre Leblanc was first trained in fine arts and religion before following the juice of life into neuropsychology and the neurocognition of music. She's completing her PhD in clinical neuropsychology at the University of Montreal, where she cultivates her fascination with rhythm as a pulse of social connection and collective understanding. As an educator and facilitator, she works to weave alternative and ancestral ways of knowing into academic and community contexts, opening dialogue between empirical inquiry, contemplative practice, and poetic imagination. In quieter moments, she tends heirloom seeds, honoring them as living metaphors of persistence, memory, and renewal. I'd like to thank all of you for being here with us today.
Glad to be here.
Thanks so much, Brett. It's such a pleasure.
Thank you.
Your research team conducted a collective heuristic inquiry into the lived experiences of 13 musicians across 4 countries who could no longer play their musical instruments due to a physical impairment. As you state in your article, you identified themes that highlight, quote, the essential elements of this experience as one that uproots their entire life, shaking them to their core, bringing turmoil and uncertainty, unleashing grief and loss, bringing a sense of being utterly alone, as well as new awareness of the body, as they try to find ways to fill the void that is left, shifting their relationship to music itself and seeking meaning, end quote. To begin, why don't you tell us a bit about your paths to studying this particular phenomenon?
Yeah, thanks, Brett. So the reason we came to this study was actually a personal one for I think all 3 of us. Um, Speaking for myself, I was very actively involved in playing music myself. I played the Baroque oboe, and this was a huge part of my life until I had to stop playing because of jaw pains. And so this brought up a lot of changes in my life, and I was curious to approach those changes as a research project. And so I was looking for a way to cast this into a research framework. And so I was looking into several quantitative approaches, but it felt like I didn't want to reduce this to a statistic and to numbers. And so I found a talk actually by Elizabeth, which first opened my eyes to this particular framework that we used, which is heuristic inquiry. And I thought, wow, here is actually a research methodology that we can use that's not trying to strip away the personal experience. It's actually trying to go very deeply into it. And so I reached out to Elizabeth, and she was very open to pursue this together. And And then Alexandra joined the picture, and all of a sudden we had this team here of people who were willing to go there, and to go there in a very deeply personal, felt way. So this is my story of how I came to this.
Thank you, Flores. Elizabeth?
Yeah, yeah, it was such a pleasure meeting Flores. And when he mentioned that he wanted to explore his experience of having to stop to play, I said, whoa, yeah, I'd love to. And I jumped right in, although I wasn't sure. I mean, how are we going to do this? I mean, I've done this on my own, and I know it works. I know it's good. I know it really goes deep into our own experiences. But although I do play piano and sing, and music is a big part of my life, always has been, I have not had that experience of having to stop playing for a physical reason. So this was a great, just an adventure. And also I was curious, how are we going to go about this? So there was a lot of creativity, I think, that was welcomed into. And then Alexandra also with her experience.
Alexandra?
So yes, for me, I also came from a similar point as Floris. So I used to play the Indian sitar for many, many years, and I developed autoimmune arthritis that emerged in my hands. So I remember I was having an espresso in the lab with Floris and probably whining about the fact that I was again trying to pick up my instrument and it was not working, and I was feeling quite sad and desperate about it. And Floris brought, but me too, I have this experience. And I remember the bubbling of, oh my god, how can we make this alive as a project. And Elisabeth came in the as a first thought of Floris, we have to ask this amazing researcher that I heard this talk about. And I had the chance to meet her, and yeah, that's how it happened.
Lovely. Lovely. As a group, you took a unique approach to this heuristic inquiry. Can you tell us a bit about your methodology, including how lived experience informs it in practice? I really think that listeners would like to hear about the artistry, the creativity that grounded the collective aspect of your research process, if you would.
Yeah, so I'll jump in. I think as I was mentioning, the creative aspect of it did flourish through our conversations, and how do we do this, and how to make the best out of it. The heuristic inquiry is just such an exciting process. I mean, we build it together, and as a trio, we knew what we needed to do, but we didn't know how to do it as a three. So we did, besides having our conversations with participants, who we called co-researchers, we also had a few conversations, the three of us, just exploring our own, in this case, Floris's and Alexandra's experience of having to stop. And I was sort of a mediator of that conversation, and we used that space to explore more deeply their experiences, and then piling on with the experiences of others, of the co-researchers as well. Yeah. And I guess Clark Mustaka's, he's also was one of the co-founders of humanistic psychology. I don't know if many people know that, right? But he developed this research model through his personal experience of loneliness, which he published in a book in the 60s, I believe. Just looking at his own experience of feeling lonely, and then through that, we thought, well, we can do this as a trio, exploring Alexandra and Floris's experience and these co-researchers, and have that as a unique. We dubbed it collective heuristic inquiry.
Which is very fitting for this project. And what else do you all see, particularly Alexandra and Flores, on your side? What do you see or feel in the process of being able to bring in your own voice to this heuristic inquiry?
Yeah, for me personally, I found it actually very refreshing because I think that a lot of the research that I was originally trained to do and that I see us do as scientists, in a lot of that research, we're trying to essentially factor ourselves out of the equation, right? It's like because it has to be objective and we have to speak to the general phenomenon or something. And I think what's wild and courageous about the heuristic inquiry approach is that it takes the exact opposite tack. It says no, actually we have to start from deeply engaging in our own experience. And so a lot of the conversations that we had in our trio, let's say, of the core researchers, as we called it in this project, we were really very deeply exploring our own experiences and sharing about that, like trying to articulate that, like what am I feeling, and sometimes also changing that like over time. It's like I think I realized like at some point like midway sort of I thought like wow, like I think there's a whole part of this that I'm not saying, maybe because I personally don't want to see it even. And so it's in a way like it goes very deep, and that's really by design, and I found that incredibly exciting.
Alexandra?
So what came for me, I also come from more of a quantitative background, and this I remember having many discussion actually with Floris before I met Elisabeth about as a clinician how I felt the huge gap in what I was doing with the statistic and specific intervals of sound, and and the fact that we were talking about musician and just lacking all this aspect of embodiment and of the experience. So for me, it was also quite life changing, I would say, to have this process that we all. It was a bit like I would say almost of a womb. The project. We would meet, we would really exchange, and it was quite alchemical for me to live this experience. Also receiving what others that went through the experience came from, comparing, exchanging, and seeing with Floris and Elisabeth how that was evolving in my own experience. So it was incredibly rich and quite exciting that research can be this. What?
Absolutely. And you know, something I really loved about this project, I have to say, is that the language that you used is so sensory oriented, so visceral. It really captures phenomenological experience as lived. And I want to note that I have used this already with students as an example of how to break the mold in terms of the restrictive and operationalized language that we often see in qualitative research. So I just wanted to share my appreciation for your work in that way. Okay, so there are 8 major themes that emerge from your study, and I think that these themes do reflect your effective use of phenomenological description to capture lived experiencing. Those 8 major themes include 1. Being shaken to the core, 2. In turmoil, the pounding waves of uncertainty, 3. Grieving the lost spark, 4. Feeling left out, 5. New body awareness, 6. Yearning to fill the void, and 7. A shift in one's relation to music, and 8. The dawn of meaning. Could you slow walk us through each of these themes, please?
Yes, and I was wondering if it would be all right if one of the steps of heuristic inquiry is actually to synthesize the results into some and in some creative artistic form. And we did that through a poem. So I was wondering if it would be all right for us to recite that poem as a way of introducing those elements.
Of course. Yes.
An image comes to mind, staring me in the eye, of a huge rock crashing into my sea. It cuts and breaks the water and lands at the place where my song will no longer be. The waves push toward me, sometimes crashing over my head as I try to take a breath. They splash over the many different shores of my life. Will I make it through? Emotions are not soft. The struggles of this loss cover me till I'm completely wet. I try moving forward, grappling for another lifeboat, while my heart turns back to look for more of what was. My body yearns for more. It hides, it screams, it waits restlessly. As I question, I drift. I ponder, what now? How do I move forward while I leave some of me behind? Do I hold on to those dreams or do I let go? Where to now? So this one of the first really clear themes that emerged from this research was this how how this experience was a profound disruption. It wasn't just a loss of something that people enjoyed, but it really shook them and disrupted all their life, affecting every part of financial routines, their relationships, identity, and it was really unwanted change, right? There, it wasn't something that they were looking forward to or working towards. It landed on them. It cut their water. So they felt torn away from music in this unexpected way. Some of the people said things like, "A hole opened in the ground under me. My life was over. The sense of the world just crumbling, or of music, was not just what they had, but everything that they wanted in their lives. And now it's not there anymore. It's not possible." And then, yeah, and then being faced with that question, what now?
What now? In such powerful language. Flores, the second theme?
Thank you, Elizabeth. The second theme that we identified was in turmoil, the pounding waves of uncertainty. And what we felt and what we identified in what people told us is that this is an experience, like, it doesn't just land on you all of a sudden and then you know what you're dealing with. It was actually a long process for some of the people that we spoke with, a process during which there was deep uncertainty as to what exactly is this, what exactly does this mean. Will I get back to play my musical instrument the way that I wanted to, or is this phase of my life completely behind me? So there's a lot of ambiguity there, and that really jumped out at us when we spoke to many people, is that there was this long process, sometimes painfully long process, by which people were trying to understand what was happening. And so they were visiting medical doctors left, right, and center to figure out what is this thing, what can be done. Of course, the particular impairments were different for everyone, but almost everyone we spoke with had this like quite prolonged period of deep uncertainty, and that's very unsettling, right? Like, if you have to think about it, how much is on the line here. This is, as Elizabeth was just saying, this is like the whole foundation of a person's life in many cases. So there was this deep uncertainty as to what this experience exactly was going to mean for the rest of their lives. Now, the third theme that we identified is what we called grieving the lost spark. And what this theme meant to us was, like, in a lot of the conversations that we had among ourselves, but also with these people that very courageously agreed to talk with us about their experience, was the this spark that music was in their lives. So um and I'm bouncing off again of like what Elizabeth was just saying, which is that like music is not just music. It's not just an activity that we do. It's not just a hobby, right? It's so much more. It actually touches, I think, on deeply on why people feel they're in this world, right? And that might sound a bit pompous, but I think that that's exactly what it is. It's like it's very core to who we think we are, for the people, of course, who have music in that way. And so this spark was something like it was just like this experience of magic that music did for us and for the people that we spoke with. Like, people recounted these incredible moments where there was like this sense of almost transcendence through music. And those are almost like key moments in a person's life. And so when you can't play your instrument anymore, all of a sudden there's question marks around those moments. Will I still experience those moments? Do they still have that meaning for me?
Something I noticed across these first three themes, if you don't mind, is this idea that these first three themes are not necessarily linear or sequential. There's a sense that these can each strike at any given moment in an unfolding process of loss. How do you all see these three? Are they temporally sequential, or I don't know? How do you view them?
I think it's a difficult question. I think for me, maybe one thing that comes up, but I'd really love also to hear from Alexandra and Elizabeth. The one thing that comes up for me is like I feel it's a very important phase of the experience, for sure. And I mean, like, is it just temporal in the sense that like then it's becomes something else? I'm not sure. I think for me, a lot of it's changed. Like a lot of that uncertainty, for example, and that grieving of the lost spark is like it's still part of the experience for me, but it's almost like it maybe got more of a place in how I think of my life personally. Um, but I don't know. I think that could also be different for other people.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, yeah, I feel like there's a sense of, when something happens in our life, and for these people, it was a huge loss of music and playing and being and identity. But in general, when something hits us, we do have to digest all of it. It's a lot of things change, and just coming to terms with it. And we talk in our article a lot about meaning making too. I mean, what sort of meaning will I, should I, is it possible to make meaning out of this? And I feel like, yeah, in terms of time, yeah, there is, um, at least it seems to there seems to be a development happening as we digest what's happening, and as we try to figure out ways to deal with the new reality. And searching. And yeah, it's a big, I think it's a process, and a very individual process, with timing, like we talk in counseling about grief and loss, right? It's part of it, but each one travels in their own velocity and direction, and yeah.
Mhm. There's definitely this aspect of non-linearity that's very important in the process. I think we could see that not everyone was at the same point, and not everyone made meaning, as we're going to talk later. But I know that for from the interviews I did, and for in my own experience, there's really those moments where it's re-emerge, as even if you think you're like grief, right? It's waves. And I know that even if it's been years now that I cannot play my instrument, 2 weeks ago, I heard someone play the sitar and I cried and I missed it. And I cried this, oh my God, I don't have this access to the sacred of that instrument anymore. But it doesn't feel like all of that is void. Like it's a big process and it's non-linear and it comes back, but it's still it can be very extended, but there's definitely like a mountain move in it. That's, yeah, I think everyone are at a
Mm-hmm.
point on the mountain.
Yes. Okay. And your next theme was feeling left out.
Right, feeling left out. So uh, musicians often play in groups, right? Because this is music making together, and we have not only do we make music, but we build a connection through music and an intimacy that's one of our participants described it so beautifully. I mean, he was really, really missing that connection, that kind of connection that is built through music. That's different from other aspects or other places in their life, and that intimacy that it entails. So, but it's gone, right? And through that, you're not called for gigs, or you're not meeting up with them. You're not having that interaction, and that feeling left out. Yeah, and yeah, it was difficult to know for many of them too. What do I tell my friends, or when I'm asked, will you play? What do I tell them? How do I explain the situation? And sometimes some of them felt kind of misunderstood, or didn't really feel like completely understood that what's going on, or you know how much do I tell people? And I'm not being lazy. I really can't play. One participant said, like, the my friends initially were really sad for me. They were, wow, I'm sorry this happened, but then life goes on, right? So they're busy doing their own thing, but I'm still here. I still can't play. So some of those relationships were lost, and some of those are friendships as well, and support, right? So this makes the journey feel, I think, even lonelier. And on one hand, there's that, and then on the other hand, there were also people who did get support that they needed, with family, with friends, and this made it less daunting, I think. Interestingly, um, several of them mentioned therapy. Counseling was essential at this point. No, I can't imagine having gone through all of that without my therapist. One of them mentioned his partner saying, "Yeah, you go and talk to to your counselor about that. This is just too much." And others just didn't want to burden their partners because it was so deep, and they felt like they needed to talk to someone else. Yeah.
Hmm. After this, you talk about the new body awareness.
So this one is really about how profoundly embodied the experience of losing your access to your instrument is. And so for the musician, the body, it's not just the mean, of course, of making music, it's the instrument. So we literally hold in our body the memory, the resonance, the emotion, it's etched in our white matter. And when that embodied knowledge collapses, it's really a loss of a felt intelligence. And sorry, I will paraphrase Merleau-Ponty, but the body is the ground of all knowing. And so when this tacit embodied knowledge, it feels silent. As a musician, you feel cut off from that precious language through which you had meaning and connection that moved. And so many of our participants also, they describe that interruption as a kind of an awakening. It was very, very fascinating. It's like their body that always was used for performance, it was silent except for pains from time to time. It came into a new presence. vulnerable, it was unpredictable, and it was saying lots of new things. And that, for some people, they were saying, I cannot believe that I didn't pay that much attention. Like one of our participant co-researchers, sorry, was saying that in all those years she was never listening to her body. She was just saying now that she couldn't play anymore, how much of a load it was that she was constantly asking. But for others, it was very transformative. So some began to sing, they rediscovered their breath differently. And it permitted to some to discover really a more integrated sense of self through this limitation. And for others, it became quite spiritual. So they begin to see their bodies not as failed instrument, but in more of a relational way, like teachers a bit, with maybe a place of attention, of humility, and even reverence. So when we speak of this new body awareness, we're kind of speaking of transformation. It's a return to presence for many of the co-participant, co-researchers.
And then we go on to the number 6 theme, which is yearning to fill the void.
So for this one, well, of course, devoting oneself to an instrument, it asks for an incredible investment. In time, you spend countless hours on general practice, on learning specific pieces. You also really build a relationship to this being that's your instrument, or multiple beings if you have multiple instruments. And and then when you learn basically to speak in the same voice as that instrument. And when you lose the ability to speak with that voice, there's this void that appears. And it's in your ability to create, to connect to music in an experiential way, to you lose access to some of the flow. So what we saw, what was that for some of our co-researcher, it felt akin to a type of restlessness, like the life force going normally through playing music, it did not disappear from the body, it just find itself with nowhere to go. And so that yearning to fill the void, it became kind of its own motion. For certain, they tried many different instruments, one after the other, just to feel like they could do some music again. And then for others, it ended up being in teaching. They started to pass down what they once expressed through the performance. Some found other ways, dancing, etc. But yes, yet most found that nothing really filled that specific multidimensional space that music playing once occupied. There's the social aspect, the creation, the connection to the numinous. Even if it's tedious, you really have access to those sacred spaces, right? This sacred element of embodiment practice. So yeah, that left a void that was quite there.
So you're speaking to the difficulty of filling that void and also pointing to the next theme, which is a shift in one's relationship to music.
Yeah, in this theme, what we identified was that the way that people relate to music changed for almost everyone that we spoke with. And it changed actually in different ways. It wasn't the same for everyone. And what we found was that so uh, almost everyone started from a very deep, profound connection with music, and that connection started to take on a different form for different people as part of this experience of not being able to play. And for some people, there was like a renewal of their engagement with music, almost like a recognition of how profound the meaning of music was in their life. And in particular, some people discovered that they thought, wow, like by having gone through this experience, I really discovered that like music is it for me. Like this is what like my life is about. And so the experience almost like it deepened their connection. It confirmed that in a way that they had not imagined possible. For other people, however, there was like a recognition that their practice of music was going to come to its end because of this experience. So these are people that found themselves turning the page in a way, closing the chapter, which was like not moving beyond it in the sense of like now it's no longer part of their life. Of course, everybody recognized that this would always be part of them, but their active engagement with it as a practice was coming to an end. And so they found themselves shifting, and we used the metaphor of the autumn to express that, which was this recognition that, like, there was this beautiful flourishing, and now it's transitioning into something else where we think back of it with a lot of affection, but it's no longer present in our life in the same way.
Yes. And then the final theme is dawn of meaning.
So for most musicians, the meaning didn't come right away in the experience. It was really in the thick of the loss. Nothing makes that much sense. Even for some, life as in general lose meaning. And with some time, some even told us that they felt very pressured to find meaning. Like, why am I not like the phoenix that just gets rebirth? Why is there all those stories of those musicians who just, they get forged by the fire and they reemerge as better musician? Why not me, right? I'm just not finding meaning. It's still raw and it doesn't make sense. But with time, though, meaning really surfaced for many people, and it took some different shapes. For certain, it was more of a transmission. So, teaching, mentoring, really sharing what they had cultivated all those years. And for others, they turned their attention to other parts of their life, like looking at their children grow, for example. They had more time for that now. And for some other, it took quite a spiritual form, a renewed sense of connection to the divine. Some started to pray again, or some people were saying, now I'm seeing the trust that there was purpose in what had happened. But still, it's quite important to recognize that it's not everyone that found meaning. So some continue to live in that space of searching without resolution. They really had the effort of meaning making, but there was still that ambiguity. They never reached that closure. So the dawn of meaning really didn't look the same for everyone, but it was powerful, even in the search, I believe.
So, what critical ideas or implications do you hope listeners will take away from your work?
So I'll start and let Elizabeth continue. So, what we hope people take away, I think, from this work is that having to stop playing an instrument, it's an experience that triples through so many layers of life: identity, purpose, livelihood, relationship, even one's sense of the sacred. So we have to remember that this experience is very prevalent. We're talking about 62% to 93% lifelong prevalence in professional musician population. So it will happen to so many musicians, and it is really not that talked about. And so for musician playing, it's not just what they do, right? It's such an important part of how they exist in the world. So when it's suddenly taken away, that loss really can feel existential. And our co-researcher showed us how vital it is to have understanding and support through each of these ripples, and not only from healthcare professional, but families, teacher, friends, and musical community. And that's what the paper is trying to bring this experience forward.
And I guess, excuse me, I also hope that whether you're listening and you're a family member or you're a practitioner or a friend who is a musician and is going through this or has gone through this, I'm hoping that it will also give you a deeper sense of a deeper understanding of what they're going through, that, what they're going through is life changing, and just supporting them, being there, listening, being a deep support and going through the storm with them is so valuable. And yeah, if you're a doctor or if you're a professional, having them come in and understanding that it goes beyond what you're seeing physically, right? The physical ailment, it, yes, hopefully there is a cure, and hopefully you'll come through, but it's not just a physical thing that's happening. And being aware of that, I think, is really important.
Anything else to add?
Yeah, and maybe I would add very briefly that I think one of the things that I'd love it if people would take away from our study is that the that there's a real value and beauty in connecting around this topic. And for me, that really stood out in this research project, with Alexandra and Elizabeth, is that I think we talked about it at some point as well. I think that the three of us, I voiced this before, that it was always transformational for myself as well to have these conversations, and just simply to be there with two other human beings in this case who cared and who were willing to go there with me. I think was tremendously powerful. And then add to that there was this intersection of the experience also that we shared, but just merely the fact of having some moment of human affinity about it, and just being willing to open up about it. I feel that it's we did that as a research team, but also um, I hope that speaks from the paper too.
It's always wonderful when there is such good quality research work such as this, and it's also it's transformational for the researchers too. So that's just wonderful. Final question, as always: what do you think is particularly valuable about humanistic counseling?
Yeah, I'll take that. And yeah, I mean, from what you're hearing, this is transformational, right? In the sense that humanistic psychology, or the humanistic view, is subjective, it's relational, it's focusing on, on people and deep relationships. And I love that. I love how there's space for all of us, and not just my problem or this research project, or we're coming in as a whole, and we're seen as a whole. And this is so precious. And looking what else looking for growth, looking for those movements that are beyond just numbers, or the movements that are that yearning, I want to do something, but I don't know how, and being there with the person, and not trying to follow a protocol or trying to fit us inside boxes, but just being ourselves. And yeah, I love how freeing and empowering that can be as a person. And I guess, to me, at our best, humanistic counseling is the embodiment of love.
It has been a wonderful opportunity speaking with all three of you today. Thank you so much for this work and this contribution to the field. And thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Brett.
Thank you.
And many thanks to you, good listeners, for spending time with us here at the Humanistic Counselor Podcast. All JHC articles can be accessed through the Wiley Online Library. If you're a member of the Association for Humanistic Counseling, then you get free access to this article and many, many others through the American Counseling Association website at www.counseling.org. If you'd like to become a member of AHC, then we hope you'll visit our website at www.humanisticcounseling.org. Thank you, be well, and hope to see you here next time on the Humanistic Counselor Podcast.